10:30, so we'll start the meeting this morning, and welcome to Stranraer. Can I ask everyone to switch mobile phones off or turn on to silent mode, and just a reminder that the meeting will be recorded and available for public listening on the website. So item 1 is Sedran and apologies. Do you have any?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've got 4 members present this morning. 3 apologies from Councillors Brody, Johnson and Young.
Thank you. So item 2 is any declarations of interest. Do you have any? No. Okay, so we'll move on to item 3, which is purely for noting. It's the minute of the previous meeting of the 1st of November, and that is for noting because it's already been approved at the PI. So are members happy to note? Yep. And then moving on to item number 4, which is an update on harbour matters. This report provides a general update on various matters relating to harbour services. Do officers have anything that they want to add to the report?
Nothing to add, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Do members have any questions that they want to raise? Yeah, Councillor Sloan.
Yeah, it's just we all received a letter from the Stranraer Harbour users with a certain amount of complaints, and I just wonder where we're up to dealing with them.
Okay, well certainly as Chair of the Harbours Committee I was also copied into that, and I can confirm that I have been in liaison with officers, and I did ask various questions that were raised. I have had it confirmed that that meeting was not approved and minuted by our officers here in Dumfries and Galloway Council. That doesn't mean to say that there may not be questions that need to be answered. And certainly I've had assurances from officers that they're currently working on that and working with the user group. But if officers have any more that they want to add to that at this point.
Well, if we could go through them.
Not at this precise moment because we're looking at this report and that's not specifically on the item here. But as I say, I've emailed all the members on that. If you've got specific questions regarding the report in front of you, unfortunately that letter has not been circulated and printed off for the meeting today. So I will check with government whether it's appropriate that we discuss a letter that's not as part of the committee papers, but I would ask that advice.
Not only has it been discussed, it's been discussed at the main committee.
The letter from the Harbours user
Yes.
group. And do you have a copy of that letter, and what date was
I
that?
have a copy of the letter. Yeah.
You have got a copy of that?
Yeah.
Okay, would you like to circulate that to all the members of the committee? I mean, I'll ask governance what the procedure is with that.
I mean, obviously the papers for this meeting are published and made available in a week in advance of the meeting as we're required to do so by law, so that the public know what business is on the agenda for the meeting. It would be really a matter for you, Chair, whether to accept anything else that added in, but really it's the information in front of you.
I would be happy to stick with the report in front of us, Councillor Sloan. If you wish to circulate any questions prior to the next committee meeting to be included as a report.
Chair, the report in front of us talks about issues of around Stranraer Harbour and its safety.
Right.
I'm hanging my questions on that because most of these complaints are about safety.
So do you have a question relating to the paper, to which paragraph would you like to raise a question?
All the officers you're talking about have a copy of this, a copy of the minute, the so-called minute. It's not a minute because it wasn't taken a minute. But they have and I'm just asking them, did they address these problems?
And I've answered that I've been in liaison with officers and they are currently addressing them. I don't know if you've been in contact with the officers and asked them direct. As I say, that copy of that meeting minute does not form part of the committee papers this morning, and I'm not willing to open up a discussion about a meeting that is not being properly recorded, because this is available to members of the public, and clearly we don't have any members of the public here today. However, if we did, and if any members wish to listen back to this committee, which they will be able to do because of the recording, it's not appropriate for us to be discussing a letter or the copy of a minute that's been circulated to some members of Dumfries and Galloway Council.
Yeah, we discussed it quite freely at EEI.
Well, I don't have a copy and we're not here to discuss EEI papers. As I say, Councillor Sloan, if you've got a question for any of the officers, you're very welcome in relation to the report in front of us to ask that question.
Yeah, I'll certainly ask what's been done since I last spoke to them.
Yeah.
Response,
Yep.
yeah, thanks. So the letter from the chair of the Stranraer Harbour User Group, a response has now gone to the chairman and responding to some of the points that he has raised in that. In relation to the minute, we've had a look at the notes of the meeting that were provided to us. We've worked through that and we've looked at some of the issues that have been raised. I understand we're still to go back to the user group on the detail of that, but it was raised, it was discussed at the last EI meeting, as you've mentioned, Councillor, and the director suggested that if the user group wanted a further meeting with officers, that could be facilitated. We could meet with them.
Could I just point out that as a member, I approached the officers, along with the director, Jan Faulkner, who came to Stranraer for the meeting, along with Will, who we met, and there I asked, could we get answers to these questions? Now, you said you've replied to the letter to the user group.
Yes.
Where's the reply to the elected members, who should get a small mention now and again?
The reply is sitting with Maureen at the moment to be issued. The letter was written on the basis that the discussions were had at this subcommittee today, because there's references to the barrier and to the proposals going forward that are in this subcommittee. So the way I drafted the letter actually said it has been discussed at subcommittee. So the letter is either issued as we're sitting here speaking, or it will be issued in the next.
What I'm asking, sorry,
And
just bear with me
all
one
members
minute.
are copied in.
All I'm asking is the questions that I, as a member, along with the director, asked of, I think it was Will, on the questions being raised in the minute, could we get a reply to it? Now, nobody said, no, you can't get a reply to it, so I'm assuming, yes, I'll get a reply to it.
Right, we can do that. We can circulate that to the members.
That's a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
No, nothing we can done with Stranraer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any further questions about the report?
No,
Nope.
sorry, Chair.
Okay, is there any other questions? Yes, Councillor Christie.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, my voice is gone for a wee bit. Councillor Johnson, unfortunately, can't be here today, but he left a wee list of questions. He's asked about the guide. Have you made links with the Cruising Club pilot book to get our harbour guides into, or our harbour navigational guides into the Cruising Club book?
The Cruising Association.
The Cruising Association, or he's put down the Cruising Club pilot book.
Yeah, I mean we're a representative of the Cruising Association for the Southwest of Scotland. So Keith has passed it on to me. Right. So yes.
So yeah, so secondly, he's asked, I sat in a meeting actually with a gentleman from Dumfries. I can't remember the gentleman's name, and he had written basically a Harbours book on guideways in and all that. Did you? How much of his work was incorporated into your copy here of the Harbour Directory? The Harbour Directory.
Sorry, Councillor Goosey, are you talking about, because there are a lot of different, pilot books. And pilotage, and also, are you asking if we're in? I need a specific publication to know.
It wasn't a publication, I'm pretty sure. I think James and Stephen were at that meeting with
Gentleman, Mr. Kerr.
Mr. Kerr, that was it, and he produced a document that basically mapped all the harbours in the area, and it seemed to be quite a comprehensive document, if I'm being honest. Was that looked at, and was any of the information from that transferred into this?
No. No.
So, sorry, do you want to?
Well, I was going to say that the information that needs to go into specific navigation information has to go from specific sources. So we have to use, for example, we use UKHO charts.
Right.
Local knowledge is fed back to the UKHO by different means, but we can't take local knowledge as verbatim, because obviously it can change. Every piece of navigable water changes, especially tidal.
Right.
So that information has to be fed back, as it was from a fisherman to me yesterday regarding the Shanley Kukubri. And then that information is investigated and eventually makes it onto charts, if that's the appropriate way. But are we talking about specific navigational information regards the approaches to the Nith?
I'm not particularly sure what it'd probably be better to raise that with Councillor Johnson offline, if I'm being honest. It was his question, but he'll be listening to the tapes afterwards.
Just coming to that point, Councillor Gusty, the Harbour Directory deals primarily with a lot of detail that Will and Ian have worked in on the council harbours, and we kind of, we hold responsibility for that data. Yep. We do also reference the other harbour facilities with less detail, for the reason you're saying in terms of we can't verify the information, but we do put contact information in, and there's certainly details for two of the keys in the Nith area. Mr. Kerr's name is mentioned, and we'll take a view on whether that whether he wants his name mentioned. But we do put contact details down, and also the website where they do their own information for the Nith and the estuaries and the approaches there. So it is linked in the draft of the Harbour Directory that we're updating.
Right.
Yes,
so I've got more questions. I've got a wee list, as I said.
Can I just suggest that if Councillor Johnson has got specific questions about specific issues, that perhaps he could maybe contact the officers about that, rather than going into every minute detail. If it's relation to the committee papers just now, then absolutely. But if there's specific issues that he's looking for questions, that may be better raised offline.
Perhaps. Let's see. Well, we'll go on to the straw slipway then, as that is mentioned in these papers. So, Councillor Johnson believes that better just raising the slipway rather than lowering the beach. I don't particularly know it. Lowering the beach, I imagine that we'd have to actually keep lowering it every few years. It would require maintenance every few years, rather than raising the slipway and meaning that the shingle couldn't actually get above it. I don't know I'm not a harbour user, so I don't actually know the technicalities of that. But what is the officer's recommendation in that sense?
Can I just jump in? Does it not? I believe it actually states in the papers that because the tide is to do with the tidal line, but maybe the officers can.
But for more information.
Well, the gradient of the slipway is a problem, and Stranraer doesn't have a particularly big tidal range, but the gradient of the slipway combined with the longshore drift does make it a problem, and it's not one that's going to go away until the geography fundamentally changes. So obviously that's going to be after the life of the slipway expires. That's as I understand the design. I mean, I'm not a civil engineer, but I've never seen a slipway in this sort of tidal range at that sort of gradient, and the reason for that is that they're designed around stopping problems like we have happening.
So would raising the slipway avoid the problems that we're having?
Well, by definition, you're going to raise the inshore end if you're going to increase the gradient of it. So yes, but as to how much you would have to raise that to offset the problems, I don't know. I'm not that, my trigonometry is not that good.
I mean, the slipway is obviously designed to tie in with the road level access in the site, so we couldn't raise it too much because you wouldn't then be able to get up onto the slipway. Clearly the relevance of the slipway is its relative level to the sea level, so if we raise the slipway, then it's going to be dry more of the time, which means it's less useful more of the time. The situation in developing a slipway in that location was always going to be a challenge. It's the southern end of a sea loch in Scotland. These sea lochs in Scotland are silting up, and there's a reference to that in the report. There is always going to be that situation going forward. It provides a hard standing onto the beach, into the water. It was never going to be a deep water slipway. That would never ever exist, and there wasn't an option for doing that. So while it doesn't allow launching of large vessels at all times of the tide, for small vessels, for trailer sailors and vessels like that, it is a suitable facility for the skiffy worlds coming up in the year. It will be a suitable facility for accessing the sea. But changing its geometry or changing its level will not improve its usage as a slipway. It might reduce the amount of sand that builds up on it, but it still wouldn't still going to be an advantage. Now we need to find a way of dealing with how the sand builds up, a more sustainable way of dealing with the sand build up. And there's reference to that in the report, and if it's suitable now, Chair, I can make some additional comment on.
Well, I was going to actually bring that up myself. You've mentioned it here, and there's an agreement required with the Crown Estate, and it was just to confirm what the situation was with the Crown Estate Scotland and how that sat with the Land Reform Act, because what happens to that money that goes to the Crown Estate Scotland? Does that come back to the local authority? What happens to the funds with that? Because I understand that there is something within the Land Reform Act within Crown Estate Scotland which is different from the Crown Estate in the rest of the UK. Do you have any further information about what that situation is?
I personally don't have the detail on that. I mean, we can speak to Bidwells, who are agents for the Crown Estate in Scotland, to determine what happens. That I'm aware that in terms of Crown Estate land in Scotland, there is a move to transferring that, the responsibility and the potential, let's say, income is questionable in some parts of the country, from Crown Estate land to local authorities or other bodies that may be willing to take on stretches of the coastline. I don't know how far we are down the legislative process in terms of that being enabled. From the point of view of where we are going forward, since drafting the report and it going for publication, discussions with SEPA and discussions with so what we want to do is if we take material off the beach, we want to be able to take it off the beach and not have to pay disposal charges. We want to use it as a product, and that comes with a cost. I think we've maybe identified in the report about £1.75 per cubic metre to the Crown Estate, because obviously if we're making something from it, they want to make something from it. But if we can find a business that can use the material, then we save disposal charges and such like. The challenge is it's getting around the exemptions with SEPA that says you're not just getting a waste off a beach and dumping it somewhere else, and that's not insurmountable. Our next matter is a meeting with procurement to ensure that if we are taking the material off the beach and there is a wish from a local builder or contractor to using that material, that we do a competitive process to have that material removed, so that if somebody's seeing it as a benefit to them, we could say, well, you can have it for free, you just take it off the beach, and then somebody else turns around to us and said, I'd have paid you £1 a cube for that to take it off the beach. And then, although we thought we'd done quite well, we could have done better. So we need to have that discussion with procurement to ensure that whatever happens. But there is an interest from a local contractor to acquiring material from the beach. So we want to pursue that, and we want to pursue it in a legal way, so that SEPA are happy with the waste regulations being Waste Scotland regulations and Environment Protection Act.
Do you have a commercial rate per cubic metre of sand or waste or material? Do you know what the commercial rate currently is? Just to where this £1.75 sits, is that
that's small. I mean, if you were to buy a ton bag of sand from Dewson's, which is about half a cube, you're probably talking more. Maybe no better than me, but 40 quid. Yeah. So £1.75 is a nominal charge from the Crown. If we took it out to sea and dumped it, they would charge us nothing. It's because we're potentially doing something with it.
Okay. David, did you want to come in with a question?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to see this moving forward, the health and safety issues on Stranraer Harbour, and the alterations to the existing layout drawing showing the new access to the slipway, and to stop the authorised access onto the working harbour part of it, I think is fantastic. One concern I have is that my understanding was there would be no vehicle access to the promenade. And I notice here that the vehicle access on the promenade will be restricted to authorised users and through lockable bollards. I'm just wondering how that can be managed and what vehicles are likely to use it. I'm told that there is the chance that groups who use the facility will get access to that facility maybe at night or whatever for drop off. Maybe you can clarify whether that's correct or.
Well, we have a larger plan in terms of the proposals for the general harbour area. So appendix 3, we have a larger plan for that for discussion if you want to provide feedback on that specifically. In terms of access along the promenade, there's I hate the way I say this, so I apologise up front. This is not a harbours matter. Beyond the slipway along the promenade you're starting moving into other functions within the authority. So you're moving into communities function, you're moving into a leisure and a SIPO function, leisure and sport, because of the way that the buildings are maintained and managed. So the Agnew Park is a communities facility. The building, the centre there that is a SIPO facility as well. So whatever discussions happen about the use of the promenade going forward have very much to be led by them as the client function for accessing along the promenade. Obviously, members are aware, and it's quite an emotive subject at the moment, is about the fact that in the past, over the last couple of years, since the development of the Skiffy shed and the Driftwood Cafe, that vehicular access has been, by default, been allowed to these facilities, neither of which had vehicular access within their planning permission. But when you come to then close off that vehicular access because of the health and safety visit, because actually we need to formalise more what we're doing in terms of the harbour, and these things get tied up in the same discussions, you end up in the situation where people are saying, well, there's a view coming forward that, well, you had vehicular access, surely we can now continue to maintain vehicular access. Until we built the slipway, there was not a vehicular access down that way. So it's this balance. So there's two arguments, I think, or two discussions that need to be had going forward. One is that the Health and Safety Executive have raised concerns about an interaction, so they made reference in their letter to a vehicle bumping up and driving along the promenade. So they are kind of directing us towards, well, you need to consider this. The other thing is that because the facilities already had planning permission without vehicular access, why are we now looking as an authority to do something that would involve a cost to us to provide them a vehicular access, a safe vehicular access? There is, parking, I accept, from the Driftwood Cafe about 140 metres away. So coming from the corner of the car park along the access path and up. If you were dropped on Agnew Crescent at the end of the path, now I know that's double yellow lines at the end at Agnew Crescent at the junction there, but if you were dropped at that point, it's about 100 metres from there to the Driftwood Cafe. If you take a drop-off point on the promenade and come back down towards the Driftwood Cafe, it's about 70 metres. So actually, in terms of vast differences, they're not huge between, say, dropping at the promenade. I think what we need to get, the promenade's wide, it's good visibility, interaction of a limited number of vehicles and pedestrians is, I'm not going to say it's a manageable risk, but when you start taking vehicles then down past the skiff shed, the path becomes much narrower. There's much more likely of hidden access, so you can come out from behind the skiff shed, a child could walk out from behind the skiff shed, these kind of things. You start having an interaction which then changes. You are moving from what is a wide path, a wide sort of road, which is a promenade, to what is principally a path within the park. And I think when you start doing that, so the discussions we have had as officers when we were at the Driftwood Cafe was that they weren't keen on seeing vehicles coming beyond the promenade to them. But that's just because we happened to be having a coffee there and got into discussion with them rather than we were formally consulting with them. Right. So I'm not sure where the pressure is coming from. I didn't get an impression the pressure was coming from the Driftwood Cafe that they desperately wanted vehicles up to their premises. They might want something a bit closer than the 140 metres or the 100 metres, but I didn't get the impression they wanted something right up to their premises. Mm-hmm. The skiff place realistically doesn't require vehicles to it on any regular basis. I mean, you can accept they might have elderly members who work there and wish to drive right up to the door, but it wasn't in their planning permission. So I'm caught a little bit here, but technically, beyond that, it's really for, you know, the economic development who is developing this gift shed and others who are responsible for this area to be leading on where we want to go with this. So I'm happy for engineering design to be involved in that sort of, you know, technical input and things like that. But it is slightly bigger than that. So
I think I would sort of look for reassurances from yourselves as the officers for the harbour to ensure, because I'm aware that Michael Rosie is doing a lot of work with the community and the regeneration of Stranraer, and just to ensure that we as a harbour authority are liaising with him to ensure that whatever happens keeps our harbour area safe and within health and safety. So if that liaison is happening between and across departments, I think that would be really welcomed, and to get that assurances from yourselves that you are working with Michael and, you know, there's liaisons both ways.
Just before Councillor Sloan comes in with the question, I would just say that the way that we will you know, manage our harbour and access to the slipway will not change what could be potentially allowed to continue to happen or stopped from happening along the promenade. In other words, there will be a drive up to the slipway which will allow unheight restricted vehicles, as we've shown, you know, an access coming away from the barrier, you know, from the former Harbour Master's office out and into the old car park, into the car park and up to the slipway. That will be unheight restricted. So anything, you know, like a delivery vehicle or such like will not have to go, you know, any other tortuous route or such like is our final proposal. So whatever anybody else decides to do in the promenade and accessing those buildings will not be impacted by our.
No, that's good to have insurance. Is it?
Can I
Dave,
just
you
come
want
back
to
to
come
that?
back and then I'll come in
Don't
with
mind.
yourself, Councillor Sloan.
Yeah. As long as, you know, if the vehicles, delivery vehicles or drop-off vehicles are accessing the promenade from the harbour, which looking at the drawing, that's what they're going to do. You know, my concern would be that they're actually accessing the promenade, which is a pedestrian promenade, from the harbour. If there was another access from the corner of the car park that made it a bit easier for them to, and I think it's important that the Driftwood and the Skiff building needs that access, if, you know, especially the Driftwood car park, I think there needs to be access for them. As long as we're looking at other options rather than putting vehicles onto a pedestrian promenade from the harbour, that's my only concern, that they're actually driving down through the harbour and then they're coming onto the pedestrian promenade.
I think what you know, in terms of health and safety, what we've talked about over a number of papers with the committee is the concept of what's reasonably practicable. If there is a desire to maintain a vehicular access to these facilities that's been informally there for the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years, is it reasonably practicable to manage traffic on the promenade? I mean, traffic and pedestrian interaction, shared space is not an uncommon thing in roads, in pedestrian areas. You know, if you're a pedestrian area, you're going to get cars driving through it during certain times and things like that. Is that manageable? Or if you spend 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 building a definitive access route to a facility, is that going beyond what's reasonably practicable? Is that, you know, you're spending £200,000 of money on a new road or £100,000 of money on a new access to a cafe facility, which is a private business, remember, you're providing that. Would that money be better spent on, you know, say you're doing this because of a concern over health and safety in part, would that money be better spent on something else health and safety wise? So that you know, I don't think I'm as clear cut on the, you know, I think we need to do, you know, risk discussion on whether the promenade is right for vehicles. If you say it's only pedestrians only, I think there's still a discussion, but I don't.
I was going to say that I know Corporate Health and Safety have been consulted on it. Michael's been speaking to them and we've saw some of the feedback, so that there are concerns and they're asking fundamental questions about the other options. Have they all been considered? Is this the best and most practical option and the only option? So that all needs to be addressed, and who ultimately is liable for that section, if it be left open in some way to a mixture of pedestrians and vehicular traffic, or even if it's closed with bollards and bollards are allowed to be open, who's ultimately responsible for that, given there's a private business involved.
Thank you. Councillor Sloan.
Yeah, just a couple of things. And the point was made that coffee is a private business. Of course it's a private business. It's there to make money, but it's also there to provide a service for the tourists that come to Stranraer, and very popular, I believe. One of the concerning things when we talked earlier about the slipway, I wondered at what time did we know the slipway was the problem that it is, and have we learned any lessons for the future from it? As far as the disabled goes, I'd like us to be very mindful of the people that use the likes of the cafe. A lot of them are disabled people, wheelchairs, etc. Even people who have difficulty walking. But 70 to 100 yards can be a distance. So surely it's not without the wit of man to devise a system that can keep everybody happy without costing a fortune.
Do officers want to respond to any of that? I mean, I think we have covered the fact that it is a separate issue, but the officers are working. But I don't know if there's any other further comments that officers would like to make.
Is that right?
I can come in there.
Absolutely.
In terms of the slipway, and it was you know a project in the past, in the recent past. In terms of its limitations, I think even at the time its limitations were understood in terms of what it could and couldn't be used for. In terms of the geography and the layout and what could fit in getting down from the promenade level onto the beach and the tidal range. And as James had said earlier, it's something that has utility. It's got function for smaller boats, and it was always going to be a situation where there was deposition on that beach, and you could see over the years that there has been the longshore drift at the bottom of the loch.
So we knew the train was coming towards us.
We knew that there were limitations, that it wasn't something that could be used at all states of the tide for all vessels, and to a certain extent the facility in the boat lift addresses that issue for larger vessels. So it has a function and it has a utility, and obviously with the fact that the skiffy shed has been built there and we've attracted the Skiffy World Championships, with appropriate maintenance, it is useful for accessing, for getting smaller boats into the water, and it's a function of the location and the solution that could be fitted in, that it wasn't going to work at all states of the tide, and the deposition of sand was going to be an issue that needed to be managed as it's happening in the whole of that length of the beach. So the decision, I would imagine, made in the past was, these downsides would be weighed against the upsides of being able to provide a facility that has complemented other parts of the expansion of the marina and the new builds around there to make the waterfront more attractive for leisure users and small vessel users.
Stephen, could I just make a point backing that up? I didn't want to sound too pessimistic about the effects of the gradient of the slipway on its benefits, Councillor Sloan. And while, yes, there is more deposit because of the gradient of the slipway, I think that is at least offset by the fact that a lot more people are willing to use the slipway because, A, it's a free facility, which is fantastic and a lot of places don't benefit from, and also because it has a lower gradient, more people are prepared to use it, so really it's a more useful facility. We do have to clear it. I clear it personally with a machine because I have a license to drive one, and that's not much of an inconvenience really. We don't need to do it too often depending on the weather, but the amount of people we have using the slipway is pretty impressive really. And a lot of people come to Stranraer to use the slipway, so it has a lot more benefits than it does demerits.
Right, and there's no cost to clearing of it.
Sorry?
You said there's no cost to the clearing of it.
Well, I mean, there's minimal costs. We're using a vehicle which is owned by the council to do it, so the costs are diesel, and that's all.
And man's time.
And my time, yeah.
Stephen, do you want to come back in? Yes.
I mean, I think in terms of the slipway design, it's a compromise and a balance between the lower it is and the shallower the gradient. You're saying smaller vessels can use it, but the more there would be deposition of sand. The higher it is, less deposition of sand, but there would still be some that there would be. But as James had pointed out earlier, you would use it at fewer times because it wouldn't. You would need to still be getting down into the tide at certain levels. I think the other issue that they've being higher is arguably it presents more of an obstruction on the beach. So it's been a balance of those to design for that location a slipway that has that's benefits outweigh some of the downsides of its operation.
Thank you for that. On a positive note, I would like to say congratulations or thank you for bringing forward the report about the Garliston wall, and I understand that it has been complete now. Is that correct? Could you maybe just give us a quick update of where we are, because obviously since this report has been written, I'm aware an email has gone out. So could you maybe update the committee?
Yes, Chair. The main works of the wall were completed on the 31st of January. Albeit that was about 6 or 7 weeks later than programmed, but they are complete. And we subsequently were working on some tidying up works around the harbour area itself. Mostly that was on the top wall to repoint areas that needed a bit of attention. That work should be finished shortly as well. And then demobilisation has also started, so clearing up the site, getting the huts away. So I'd like to think the next week or so we might see the site completely cleared.
That's great. I mean, obviously it is a long time coming, and there's been various delays with weather and other issues that have been out with our control, but it is good to see that completed. So thank you for taking that forward. Is there any other questions on the report in front of us? Okay, in that case, let's move to the recommendations. So we're being asked to note 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. We're being asked to agree 2.4, agree? And note 2.5 and 2.6.
Yeah.
We're being asked to agree 2.7 and to note 2.8.
Yep.
Agree 2.9.
Yep.
And note 2.10 finally.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Moving on to item number 5, we have the Harbours Capital Works Programme, and this report provides members with the details of the capital spend for 2018-19. Do officers have anything that they wish to update the committee on this report?
If I could, Chair, yes. On page 71 in table 4, the proposed capital works for Harbours for 1920, there was a couple of costs that were being, as the report was being written, we were still working on those costs.
Yeah.
And at Port William, the lighting there, the estimate is approximately 16,000 to be added to the capital report. And at Garliston, the lighting there, the estimate is about 9,000 for the lighting upgrades, replacing existing columns and installing the LEDs and the floodlights.
Okay, thank you. Was there any update on page 70 at Stranraer at the top of that table? There was also the cost being prepared for the improvement work for the access arrangements, or is that? I mean, clearly we've discussed that quite a lot in the previous item. Yes. Is that still being worked on currently? That's
still being worked on, and is obviously a function of what the final form of that is. There is a drawing within the papers there, and we have a larger plan that we can look at some point in the meeting or after the meeting. But obviously those works in terms of the access and dealing with the HSE issues aren't completely tied down, but we're working on that. And as you'll see in the reports, the interim measures are to, in the very near future, replace the barrier, and then as a third phase, and obviously trying to avoid make sure there's no impacts, and therefore probably after the Skippy World works, the more comprehensive works to the harbour will be undertaken to address the access issues.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any further questions on this?
I don't think so, Chair.
No? Okay, so if we move to the recommendations, we're being asked to note 2.1 and agree 2.2 and note 2.3 and 2.4.
Yep.
There we are. So I don't have any other business as deemed urgent, so I'd just like to say thank you for attending today, and we will see you next time. Thank you.